Hello and welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. My name is Tyler, and man, we have got another upsetting episode to talk about with our Baltimore Orioles. I think now we can say the Orioles are the saddest franchise in the American League. We'll leave the NL alone since they've got the Rockies over there, and they are their own version of horrific and potentially worse than any team we've seen in my lifetime. And that's because the White Sox, who were, I think, coming into the season, the most pitiful franchise in baseball, and that includes the American League, they just got to bump up because now God's on their side. The new Pope is a White Sox fan or was a White Sox fan from Chicago. He's a South Sider. So that I think puts the Orioles in the absolute bottom of the bin in terms of baseball franchise. I don't know, godliness, positivity. It's all pretty much terrible for the Orioles right now. They got swept this week by the Minnesota Twins, who are not a good baseball team. They do have a positive run differential, but haven't been terribly good this year. The Orioles, though, it makes it look easy. The Twins took care of business, no problem. Orioles get swept. So any hope of that Yankee series win last week being sort of a harbinger of things to come really goes out the window. The Orioles lose 2 out of 3 to the Royals, then get 3 losses in a row to the White Sox, to the Twins, and now the Orioles are losers of 5 in a row. I think some big questions have to be asked now. And that's kind of what I want to focus on in this episode is that, we've kind of talked about the pitching to death on this show. I think coming into the year, the pitching was a big talking point because it was pretty obvious for most people to say, like, this pitching staff, the starting staff in particular, is not going to be good. I think the hope, even from the Orioles internally, if they had an honest conversation with you, they would have said, yeah, we don't have an ace. We hope Grayson Rodriguez will become that, but we understand that that's sort of an upside play, a hopeful play that you can't really count on right now. And what we have assembled right now is sort of a mediocre bunch that hopefully can punch above its weight a little bit. And the offense can buoy us because the offense was good in 2024. Yeah, it fell apart down the stretch a little bit, but a lot of young guys, those guys are going to learn from those things. They're going to develop. And, they're certainly not going to get worse, not much worse. They should all grow and improve, and the offense is really going to carry this team, and that'll buy us some time for us to either figure out something at the top of the rotation, or for Rodriguez to really ascend, or for Bradish to get healthy, and really none of that is happening. The Orioles' offense, I think, right now is the issue with this team. And that's not to say the pitching staff can be forgiven for anything, but when you come into a season saying we kind of know the starting staff is going to be, not the spearhead of this team, they are kind of along for the ride and sort of just giving the offense a chance to win the games for you. Well, the offense has to hold up their end of the bargain. They have to win the games for you, and that's just really not happening. And I think I saw a tweet that got then reposted onto Reddit from Andy Koska, who is the writer or the beat writer covering the Orioles for the Sun, I believe. And Andy wrote after the Orioles lose to the Twins, a game it felt like they should have won, but since April 20th, which was Easter, and that was the day the Orioles got destroyed by the Cincinnati Reds. So I think it's okay to kind of use it as a resetting point of let's exclude some extreme data there. But since April 20th, the Orioles are 16 for 123 with runners in scoring position. Now, let me whip out my calculator right here to give you what that is as a batting average. That would be a 130 batting average. So this kind of shows again the issue with the Orioles offense is that they're getting people on base, not at a great rate. I think if you look at stats, on base percentage and things, the Orioles are not good at that. But they're getting guys on base. They're not cashing in on those because they are overly reliant on the home run ball, and the home runs are coming at an okay rate, but they're not like some juggernaut in the power department. So what this sort of, time frame since April 20th made me want to do was go look at how things are going for both the offense and the pitching staff since that April 20th. So I looked here, I put in April 21st through the end of the season, which, it's through yesterday's date, for the starting pitchers. And since that date, which again, that April 20th was that Charlie Morton start against the Reds, everything was terrible. So let's start on the day after that. The Orioles are 26th in MLB in ERA, which is a 5.06 ERA. This is their starters, by the way, not all of the pitchers. Their FIP, their fielding independent pitching, is 5.35. Again, not very good. And their XFIP, their expected fielding independent pitching, which is sort of like what you would expect to get, is 5.41. So certainly not good. Not good, but not the absolute worst in baseball. The Rockies are way down there. The Marlins are really bad pitching staff this year. Um, and the Blue Jays have been bad since then. But what I will say is they are in the conversation with some other teams with this pitching staff. They're allowing 5 runs a game. The Angels are allowing about that. The Nationals are allowing about that. The Dodgers are on here. Their starting staff has a 4.66 ERA since then. Dodgers are a good team. And I think coming into the season, sort of my expectation was that this was going to be an ERA of a 4.5 ERA type of rotation, which is not that far off from what they're doing here. 5.06 ERA since then is not terribly far off from the 4.5 ERA I was expecting. If they had a 4.5 ERA, they would be 23rd in the league. They'd be what the Dodgers are right now. So the Orioles are 26th. I expected them to be kind of 23rd based on what the team was. And that's okay because I think you expected this offense to average 4.5, 5.5 runs a game. That was the goal. Now more on the pitching staff. I wanted to look at what the individual pitchers were doing since then, and I think we're starting to see some interesting things here. Charlie Morton, still bad, shouldn't be starting games. They started him this week, I guess kind of out of necessity. It wasn't one of his worst starts, but he certainly wasn't good. But you are seeing 3 pitchers sort of separate themselves here. Dean Kramer, Cade Povich, Tomoyuki Sagano. Kramer's got a 4.32 ERA in this time, Povich a 4.67, and Sugano a 2.50. Both Kramer and Povich have ERAs that pretty much match their peripherals. They are not, outperforming things by leaps and bounds. Sugano that's kind of always going to be how he is because he's just not a guy that really overpowers, doesn't get a ton of strikeouts, gets some good batted ball luck, but that 2.5 ERA probably not as good as it's better than it probably should be. His FIP is 4.49 and his xFIP is 3.82. So kind of reflection that he gets weak contact, but a lot of it. That probably some more of those should go for hits than they do, but regardless, Sagano's been good. Kramer's been much better recently. Povich has bounced back, and I think if you looked at this rotation at the start of the season, you take away Eflin, take away Rodriguez because they're hurt. I think these are the 3 you probably expected to sort of ascend a little bit. Kramer, the dude is what he is. He is a back end guy that's going to give you innings. He's going to compete. He's going to give you a 4 to a 4.5 ERA, and that's what he's doing right now. After being really bad to start, he's getting better. Povich looks closer to what he was in September last year, which was really, really good. He struggled out of the gate, but he's bouncing back. When he's more aggressive in the strike zone, even if he's not getting whiffs, he's just much, much better. Now, keep an eye on Povich's BABIP. It's only 196 batting average balls in play. That's really low. You'd expect that baseball gravity takes effect there a little bit, and his numbers will not be as good. But I think Povich, I believe in him again as a back end type of arm. I don't view him as a future ace or anything like that, but he's been closer to what I expected him to be in these last 3 weeks, 3.5, 2.5, 3 weeks than he was the first 3 weeks of the season. And then Sagano looks like the veteran pitcher the Orioles thought they signed. Um, you know, Giving you innings, keeping you in games, putting the offense in position to win. Now, other guys on here, Brandon Young, Keegan Aiken made an opener appearance. So that doesn't even really count. Charlie Morton's been bad. Kyle Gibson's been, made 2 starts, one really bad, one not great, but, passable. He'll get another start here this weekend against the Angels to kind of cement his spot for the time being. But if Gibson can be passable, you add him to Kramer, Povich, Sagano, that gives you 4 arms that are, major league level to a degree. Zach Eflin is coming back this weekend from the IL. That gives you 5 guys that now you feel, okay, these guys can go through an order 2 times, and I don't feel like I need to cover my eyes every at bat. Morton, I think you need to keep him in the bullpen for much longer. If you want to still salvage that, and I get it, you paid him the $15 million. I'm sure he, as a professional, doesn't want to go out like this. I mean, if he gets released in the middle of the season with, basically being the worst pitcher in Major League Baseball, that's probably not how he wants his really good MLB career to end. He's been a really good pitcher for a long time, done a lot of really good things. I don't think he wants to go out this way because he even had a comment a couple weeks ago saying how he didn't want to go out the way he did with the Braves last year because he had a couple bad starts that he feels skewed his stats. And he doesn't feel like that's the pitcher he truly is. He thinks he's much better than the numbers he showed with the Braves last year. I mean, his numbers are like double what they were with the Braves last year in a bad way. So, um, all that to say, Kramer, Povich, Sagano, Eflin, I think you feel okay about those four. Gibson is a stopgap, okay. And then potentially you're getting, Kyle Bradish back sometime in the second half. He seems like he's ahead of schedule from all these things I read about Bradish. He's throwing bullpens and stuff already. I mean, he sounds like a guy that is starting up spring training now. And when you start up spring training, you have probably 6 to 8 weeks before you're making your debut, which that would put him at debuting sometime after the 4th of July, which feels early. I had him pegged more as like an August guy, but I mean he could get back in July based on some of the stuff and the reports I'm hearing about that reporters are putting out there. It's not like I have secret sources. That's just stuff that's putting out there about bullpens he's throwing and things like that. He just seems ahead of schedule right now. This is all this to say that I think the Orioles rotation is rounding into form of what the Orioles hoped and thought it should be, which is fine. If Bradish comes back earlier and he's the guy he was last year before he got hurt, and obviously the season before that when he was a Cy Young contender, now we're talking about more of a 4 ERA type of staff with Bradish having like a 3 to 3.5 ERA, being a Cy Young type and ace type at the top of the rotation. Now you feel, oh, okay, this is a group that we can work with. Batista's been good in the bullpen at the back. The bullpen's faltered a little bit this last week or so, but in general, I think the guys you really care about back there have been fine. Batista in particular, Cano's had a little bit of a wobble, but I think in general you feel good about him. Um, Soto sort of similar. Sir Anthony Dominguez is a wild card that I think day to day he's kind of that reliever that I don't really love when he's in the game because it could really implode. But um, the pitching staff is getting to a point where I think you feel okay. This is sort of what we expected. Now again, the bar for them is low. The Orioles coming into the season did not think they needed the pitching staff to be a top 10 pitching staff. They thought they could be a top 20 staff, top 15 staff maybe, and get by with the offense. So on to the offensive side of things. The offense, and I wanted to look at team stats here too. So let me duplicate this first because I want to look at first the team stats and then the player stats like I did with the pitching staff there just a second ago. Because the team stats are bad on the hitting side of things. And again, not to say that the pitching staff has been good, but it has been closer to what the expectation was, which, when you put all these numbers into your computer, as I'm sure the Orioles do before the season starts, is you say, okay, what can we expect on, these incremental outcomes from the team, a 60th percentile season for the offense and a 20th percentile season for the pitching staff. And I bet you they can move that range up and down. And I would imagine the pitching staff's outcomes range was pretty low, a pretty narrow band. I don't think you expected the pitching staff to be fantastic. I don't think you expected to be as terrible as it was to start the year. And we're getting back to that. And you can kind of then fiddle with the offense to say, like, okay, well, the offense has this wider range of being probably above average to the best offense in baseball. I think that's the potential range the Orioles came into the season thinking about with the offense, and it's just not materializing. So again, the same range I was talking about with the pitching staff from the 21st through yesterday's games, the Orioles offense in terms of WRC plus, weighted runs created plus, they are 26th in baseball. There are 30 teams in baseball, so there are only 4 teams worse than them at 80. So they are 20% worse than league average in terms of weighted runs created plus. Batting average, we don't all want to talk about batting average, but it gives you an idea of, these guys hitting the ball. Are they hitting the ball? Orioles have a 221 batting average. That is 28th in baseball. On base percentage, 283, 28th in baseball. Slugging percentage. They'll probably jump up a little bit. Oh, had an error on Fangraphs today. 25th in baseball at 337. And their WOBA, their weighted on base average, is 278, which is 26th in baseball. So for all of these, and let's look at runs scored because, we want to talk about outcomes ultimately. The Orioles have the worst offense in baseball since the 21st of April. They've scored 36 runs. The Pirates have scored 40. Pirates manager just got fired. Padres have scored 46 in one fewer game. They've scored 10 more runs than the Orioles. They played one less game than them. Even the Rockies, who I think we would all agree are the worst team in baseball, have scored 47 runs in 16 games since then. So they've played one more game than the Orioles. They've scored 11 more runs. Um, Nobody was thinking the Rockies were a World Series or a playoff contender coming into the season. I think some people had the Orioles certainly as a playoff contender. I think, most places would have said, yeah, the Orioles will compete. They'll be, 500-ish, 500-ish, maybe 85 win, 90 win. That felt like reasonable. They can make a wild card run. Maybe challenge the Yankees for the AL East title. The Yankees aren't as good this year as they were last year. Don't have Juan Soto, don't have Garrett Cole. Um, the offense is pitiful. The offense is absolutely pitiful. Let's look at walk rates, strikeout rates, all this other stuff. It's all going to point in the same direction. Orioles have a 6.8% walk rate, 28th in baseball. Strikeout rate, 26.5%. That's the second highest strikeout rate in baseball in that time span. Only the Angels are worse. So that'll be interesting this weekend. The Orioles and the Angels are two of the worst offenses in baseball, especially in the last 3 weeks. And it really is an issue here because I think, this calls into question the entire philosophy of the organization. Basically look at how they draft, look at how they develop. The Orioles do not make adding pitching talent to the organization early in their careers a priority at all. The Orioles do not care about getting 18-year-old to 22-year-old pitchers. They let other teams kind of sift through that stuff, make some mistakes, gather some data, and then pick up the scraps. They kind of did that with Kyle Bradish to a degree. They let him kind of cut his teeth in the Angels organization. The Angels are an organization that I don't think has shown the most understanding on how to develop pitching. And I think the Orioles felt they had some secret sauce that they could take these pitchers, a dime a dozen, and you're going to apply these same theories to them, these workout regimens to add velocity and apply them to these pitchers. And some of them are going to pan out to the degree that they can be competent, passable major league pitchers. I think on the relief side of things, the Orioles do occasionally find some studs there that nobody else really sees. Cano's a good example. Batista's a good example uh, that other teams don't seem to value. Danny Coulomb was a good example, I think, for this year when they made the decision I didn't understand at the time where they went with Coulomb over Perez. I think there was obviously a financial difference. Coulomb would have made more money. But the Orioles do seem to know what they're doing in terms of finding some bullpen arms and turning them into something. On the pitching side of things, that has not really been the case. Bradish has worked out well in terms of an Elias success story. They got him very, pretty young from the Angels, and I believe the Dylan Bundy trade developed him. And he's when he's healthy, he's really, really good. Grayson Rodriguez is kind of a failure. I know he wasn't drafted by them, but he looked really promising in the minors. It hasn't really worked out in the big leagues. He's been sort of okay versus great. DL Hall, they could never figure him out. Now the Brewers can't really figure him out either, and he gets hurt a lot. But the Orioles had some pitching talent in the pipeline that they really didn't develop into anything. But anyway, that's the pitching side of things, right? They don't really value getting a ton of talent on the pitching side of things. They think they can kind of just get by, do some stopgap stuff at the major league level. They can buy cheap on the bullpen and turn guys into something that has worked on occasion, and then maybe they can make a trade or sign a big time guy at the top of their order, top of their rotation. They did that with Burns last year. Sounds like they try to do it again, but they're very picky in that regard. But that's the pitching philosophy. The offensive philosophy is the flip. I think the Orioles don't believe they have to really spend very much on offense. They don't give out these big deals on offense. They don't really do the stopgap stuff on offense as much. They've got the Tyler O'Neill deal, but in general, they believe in their ability to draft and develop young hitters. They have spent almost all of their premium draft capital on hitters. Adley Rutschman won one. Now they took him over Bobby Witt. People want to complain about that. At the time, look, I mean, Rutschman, premium player at a premium position that, I think there are still some things about Adley Rutschman on the offensive side, the peripherals and stuff on him. You can't overly question that move, but obviously Bobby Witt's a superstar. Gunnar Henderson, was great last year. What's going on this year? Heston Kjerstad, second overall. That's not looking great. Colton Cowser, good last year, hurt this year. Does strike out a lot. Jordan Westberg, All-Star last year. He hurt this year, was pretty bad before he got hurt. Who else we got? Um, Vance Honeycutt last year, he's not doing great down. I think he's in Aberdeen. Jackson Holiday, I think, is a success story right now. Obviously, top prospect going into the draft. The Orioles took him one, was fantastic in the minors, struggled really bad last year, struggled the first month or so this year, but has been pretty good in the last couple weeks, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But this data, and this is not just this 3 week chunk. This is going back to the All-Star break last year, basically. Not these exact numbers, but the offense was bad in the second half last year. And it wasn't just one or two players, it was pretty much everybody. Gunnar was still hitting pretty well in the second half. Wasn't as insanely good as he was in the first half, but still good. Pretty much everybody else was a flop in the second half. And we're seeing that continue into this season with, basically the same bunch of guys. O'Neill's in there now, Laureano's in there now, but in general, it's the same batch, and it starts to make you question everything about the rebuild and the direction of the club because, like I said, this is not a small data point now. This is months long. This is what cost you in the playoffs. You pitched very well. All the complaints about the pitching last year. Look at the series last year in against Kansas City. Burns was great. Eflin was great. Bullpen was good. The offense didn't show up to the Kansas City series. And now, again, you have the same situation here where, okay, the pitching staff's still not good, but it's basically doing what the front office expected it to do now these last couple weeks. And this is potentially the worst the Orioles have been all season because the offense has absolutely disappeared. So let's look at it on a player by player basis. Again, this is since April 21st, including April 21st. Ryan O'Hearn is the best hitter on the team, 193 WRC plus. Emmanuel Rivera has only had 16 plate appearances. He's got an 183 WRC plus. Jackson Holiday, 156 WRC plus. He's got 2 home runs. Both of them came in the same game. 7 runs scored, 3 RBI. He's walked 8.5% of the time, struck out 25.5% of the time. So the strikeout rate's still high. And his BABIP is 407, which is high. Probably going to come down there. But Holiday's looked much better. Ramon Laureano, been a nice little surprise. Has a 107 WRC plus, walking almost 10% of the time. Gunnar Henderson, 96 WRC plus. Jordan Westberg, only 20 plate appearances in this time, but 98 WRC plus. Adley Rutschman, 86 WRC plus. Gets worse. Kobe Mayo, negative 29 WRC plus. Cedric Mullins, 44 WRC plus. Tyler O'Neill, only 9 plate appearances, negative 100 WRC plus. Ryan Mountcastle, 35 WRC plus. And Heston Kjerstad, 10 WRC plus. So as a reminder, I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're familiar with WRC plus, but 100, positive 100 is average, league average. So if you're at 10, that is 90% below league average. If you're at 35, like Ryan Mountcastle, that's 65% below league average in terms of your overall offensive output. So Gunner's been about league average, 96. Westberg, 98, league average. Rutschman, 86, 14% below league average. Mullins, who was so good to start the season, 44 WRC plus. That's 56% below league average. Kobe Mayo, negative 29. So 129% worse than league average. Really, really bad. They're trying to make it happen with Kobe Mayo. The Mayo stuff is a little bit frustrating because look at the team. Look at the Orioles major league roster. Why is he at third base still? Jordan Westberg's your third baseman when he's healthy. Gunner's your shortstop. Jackson Holiday's your second baseman. I'm fine with Mayo being familiar with third base, with having reps at third base, but he's not going to be your third baseman for the foreseeable future. I get he's playing there now because Urias is hurt and Westberg is hurt. He can't. They've known for a long time he can't field the position adequately. He's got the strong arm. Let's try some outfield. We know first base maybe is more of a need. Mountcastle's struggling. O'Hearn's probably not here long term. Try him at first base more. I just don't know what the Orioles are doing with Mayo. It's very confusing. And then when he comes up and doesn't hit well, it's doubly like, what are you doing? Because this is a player that they've coveted. I'm sure the league has coveted. You don't have an ace at the top of the rotation. You don't know really what Kjerstad is because you haven't let him play until this season, and now it's really not going well. Your plan in center field, I guess, long term is Mullins is going to go, and then Bradfield's going to play center field next year. Is I guess what the plan is, or maybe Kowser plays there for the first 2 months before Bradfield, plays at AAA a little bit or something. But the Mayo stuff is just befuddling because he's not playing well. It seems like his confidence is gone. The fielding isn't going well, which that's potentially an element of it. Is the guy might not have a ton of confidence in his fielding ability because it's been questioned for so long. He's not oblivious to the realities of what he is capable of. Try him at something else. Let him take his mind off of stuff to let him excel at the plate or something. Let him play first base. Let him play right field. Do something different because he can't field the position. He has too many errors at it. And he's got the strong arm. I get it. You don't want to waste it, but like maybe put it in right field. But Mayo's another one that kind of goes in the bucket of you question the organizational philosophy of all of this. Look at Mayo's stats offensively down in the minors. He's fantastic. So I'm not questioning that they see value in the bat. But the glove's been a problem for a long time, and now it's being exposed while at the same time he's not hitting because he's trying to learn the league. So I feel like it's you're getting double jeopardy there where he he's thinking about his glove too much because he doesn't have a ton of confidence. That carries over to the plate where he's now struggling there and it goes back and forth. Take something off his plate. Take something off his plate. Let him play some DH. Let him play the outfield. Um, because just right now it's not working and you just start to question what the Orioles are doing there because could you have traded Mayo for Garrett Crochet or somebody before the season started? Was that on the table? Maybe it wasn't, but man, it's tough to watch all this happen at the same time. So where do the Orioles go from here? Look, there's no easy answers to it. You're not blowing up this team in the middle of the season. I think, like I said earlier, the pitching staff is just starting to kind of figure its way out. It's getting healthier. Eflin coming back feels huge there to have, an actual five again if Gibson can kind of hold things together. And you just have to hope that the hitters get it sorted out. But the approach needs to change. The players need to change themselves. It's just not working. They're striking out too much. They're not walking enough. The home runs are what they are, but man, it's not working. It's not working. They need to do the little stuff. And that is like an old school, grouchy old man type of take. But just do little things to scratch runs across, to score one run here, one run there, versus like always trying to go for a 5-run inning. It's very frustrating. And I know it's the team is designed and it's not repeatable to say what I'm suggesting is to always rely on like a single stolen base, a bunt, and a flare into right field or something. Like that's not a repeatable process. Whereas I can count on this dude knowing how to hit the ball out of the ballpark. But the home runs aren't happening right now, and you need to put the defense on its toes. The stuff against left-handed pitching is just insane right now. How they can't hit lefties, and they need to throw the book out of what they're doing against left-handed pitching in general. The platoon stuff ain't working. It's just the whole approach needs to change immediately for the Orioles to have any hope of making the playoffs right now. Because, and I did this math on the podcast a couple weeks ago, I think, and it hasn't really changed. The Orioles basically need to play at a 92 win type of pace from this point forward to get to 85 wins on the year. Right now they're on pace for like 102 losses. They need to play like a 92 win pace for the entire season. That's playing like 540 ball or something like that. What is that? I'll do the math again real quick. This is a math podcast as it has always been. But 85 or I'm sorry, 92 divided by 162 is a 567, 568 winning percentage. That's the rate they need to play at from now to the end of the season to get to like 85 wins. That's not impossible. Like look at this team coming into the season, you go, that's possible. Yeah, 90 you got to win 92 games to win the AL East or something. Like that feels doable. They won 91 last year. The team is basically the same. You lost Santander, you got O'Neill, you lost Burns. You didn't really replace him, but you got Sagano. Like feels possible. If the rest of the league's a little bit worse, you get another win, make a trade, whatever. But do you see that as possible right now with the team that they have? It doesn't feel like it. And it's they need to do it now because I think if it doesn't happen, Hyde's definitely gone at the end of the season. Um, Elias probably wouldn't be, but you can't pin how terrible this team is right now on Brandon Hyde. I just don't see how you can do that. The pitching staff has not performed, and the hitters are, as a collective, It's not working. So the data that's being fed to these guys on a day-to-day basis for them to break it down, it seems impossible to me that all of these guys that were doing well last year with the hitting coaches they had, which they got rid of those guys. It seems impossible that they've totally fallen off a cliff this year. So that to me does not feel like a Brandon Hyde issue. However, what likely happened in the offseason was, hey, Brandon and Elias talk to each other and they say, look, second year in a row, we flamed out in the playoffs. Look, we need results now. So I'm not firing you, but you need to figure out changes to this staff, to the day-to-day approach that look, our programming, our arithmetic that we're doing in the front office tells us that Gunnar Henderson hits the ball this hard, he swings at this rate, Adley Rutschman does this, these pitchers throw this thing there. When those things happen at these types of rates, we're going to win X amount of games, and that's good enough for us to make the playoffs. And that's good enough for us to make the ALCS or whatever. But in the actual practice of the games, this didn't happen at this time, and that meant we got swept again. So you need to be doing a better job day to day with getting the information in these guys' ears at the right time so that they can perform. And uh, maybe they did a total overhaul of the day to day approach. They got new bench coaches. I think they got new hitting coaches. Um, the pitching stuff has changed a little bit. I know Drew French is still there, but I forget the guy before him that's the director was the director of pitching. He's gone. They've overhauled a lot of stuff, and it's pretty much all universally failed. Um, so if the Orioles continue to play this poorly, despite everything Mike Elias is saying, I don't expect him to uh, allow Brandon Hyde to come back in 2026. It would be. It does seem to me that ownership really buys what Mike Elias is selling in terms of how to put a winning baseball team on the field. But we know that David Rubenstein has said before, he's made it very clear, look, I'm an older guy. I'm not going to live forever. I want to win a World Series. If he doesn't think Elias is the guy for that, they'll make a change. But it feels like getting rid of the GM after one bad season, given how long he's been here and the rebuild did go relatively fast. The team has been good up until this season. I don't see that happening. So my expectation would be if this continues, Brandon Hyde's going to be gone, and it's probably going to be before the season ends because look, the Pirates have already fired their coach. They want to make the most of Paul Skeens. The Orioles, I think, have even more at stake right now with Gunnar and Adley and Kowser and Westberg and Holiday. They cannot waste another season. They can't even waste half a season. And I think like right now, the Orioles can still salvage this, but they basically need to start playing like 500 ball for the next week or two. Then they need to ratchet it up even further to playing a game or two above 500, and that gets you, to June, July. Bradish comes back, you can go on a run. And I think if Brandon Hyde can have these guys as like an 80 to 90 win team by the end of the season, that's like an amazing job. And yeah, you bring him back. But right now, they show no signs of life. And I think if this goes on for another week or two, despite everything Mike Elias is saying right now, you can't just roll with Brandon Hyde. You can't waste all this time. And yes, even that then might be too late to salvage the season. It's going to be really tough to come back from being 10 games back in May or whatever it might be at that point. But they need to shake something up. And, the only thing you can do mid-season is fire a head coach. And you can shuffle the roster a little bit. You can cut some dead weight. Charlie Morton could go, Cionel Perez could go. You could promote some younger guys, but it's not like the Orioles have guys ready to step up and take over the team and propel them to, a playoff spot. That just isn't in the cards right now. But they can fire the manager, which can shake up the dugout and the clubhouse a little bit, and maybe that knocks a couple things loose. But look, that these are people. That's not going to just make them turn around. There's something functionally broken right now with how the Orioles are approaching the game, especially on the offensive side of things. Whereas I think the pitching is a talent limitation. The offense is not a talent limitation. It is an approach issue, and I don't know. I don't know enough to tell you what needs to be fixed. But right now the offense is really broken, and it's been going on for way too long. It's been going on for 10 months at this point, and I think the Orioles are going to have to make a decision here in the next couple weeks, um, especially if they don't turn things around. So that's my take. Now, I know that wasn't a great analytical diagnosis of the Orioles issue, but it's just frustrating. That's just the emotions the team brings right now. Is they're not a lot of fun to watch. Now they're going to go out on the West Coast and play some late night games that I know I personally don't end up getting to see a lot of those games because I've got kids and I am falling asleep on the couch at 9:30 some nights, watching the news, let alone a baseball game that my team is losing by 5 runs in the second inning or whatever. So we'll see what happens this weekend in LA. The Angels are a bad team. The Orioles should win games against bad teams, but the Orioles are an even worse team right now. So if the Orioles get swept again, they go 0 for on this road trip. I don't see how Brandon Hyde comes back to Baltimore. Um, but if they take 2 out of 3 or win three, I think that'll buy him the home stand, and we'll see how things go from there. But ultimately, I'll just say I don't believe this to be like a Brandon Hyde issue. This feels organization wide. The minor league guys are not playing that well right now. The major league guys are not playing very well, so it's just maybe something has changed in terms of the analysis and of baseball in this last year, and the Orioles have kind of missed the boat a little bit. And it would be unfortunate for Brandon Hyde to kind of take the fall there, but given where the Orioles are right now, I don't know what the answer is mid-season. Um, so yeah, that's all I've got for this episode. We'll be back on Monday with another episode. If there's any news between now and then, we'll certainly jump in here with an episode on that. But yeah, hopefully the Orioles turn it around. I don't want to be over baseball in May. I was thinking I'd be watching baseball I cared about until September this year. So hopefully we still get a chance at that. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode. If you like the show, subscribe to us on YouTube and on your preferred podcast app. It's free everywhere. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all the third-party apps as well. Check those out. And go to believe.com. That's BLEAV.com for our show as well as others. Uh, we they've got shows about everything. If I just go to the shows tab here while you're watching on YouTube, you can get a good idea. They've got football, basketball, baseball. They've got pop culture, fantasy. So check that out. It's not all just sports. They do have some pop culture, movies, and TV shows and things like that. So go to believe.com. They've been supporting us this year, getting ads on the show, and that helps us kind of keep this thing going. But yeah, I'm Tyler. This has been the Warehouse Podcast, and we'll talk to you on Monday. Go O's.